going on around you. You are in a state of war, and you have precious little time to save yourself. It's a slow process, which we call active measures. What matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. With a violent change of power, structure, and economy, period of normalization. This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. The disaster is coming closer and closer. The danger is real.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Hector. We don't really need the rest of the Call of Duty one. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Hector. I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you're going to have a great start to your weekend and had a wonderful week. I'm here with my co-host, Gilbert.
Hey, everybody. How's it all going?
And I'm here with very special guest, John Robin.
Hello, guys. You can say Jean Robin, but since it's a French pronunciation, you can call me John.
Yeah, I'll just call you John. I'm not doing the French one. I'll leave it to Gil. Gil has a nice little introduction written up that he can do it much better than I can.
Yeah, so great. Yeah, Jean Robin. Yeah, thanks for joining us. It's a I try. It's a real honor and a privilege. You know, thanks for taking time out of your day to spend with us to educate us all on some very important topics to do with anti-communism and Europe. Especially France. So I'd just like to introduce our esteemed guest here. Of course, he is Jean Robin, or John. Jean Robin is a CEO, author, and philanthropist I've got here. He is, certainly. He has authored more than 70 books on varying subjects like anti-communism, politics, Christianity, science, civilization, culture, and history. He has his own YouTube channel where he speaks to his French audience and holds monthly anti-communist conferences with Jeff Nyquist, our very own Trevor Loudon from NZ, and Alexander Benish. And I can personally attest that these streams, these anti-communist conferences, would be well worth your time. They're very interesting, and looking into all these guys is you know, you won't help. You'll just benefit no matter what if you listen in. So well worth your time, guys. So Jean Robin, welcome to the show. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, and thank you for this invitation and this presentation. So I can add to that I was converted 9 years ago by God, and so I was an atheist for the first 36 years of my life. And then I became a Christian, a Reformed Protestant. And so that's why I moved to French Polynesia, because believe it or not, God told me to. And so, but like Jonas, I refused in the first place because I was too far away and we knew nobody here with my wife. And so we refused. But that was end of 2014. And then there was the Charlie Hebdo massacre. And so we said, okay, let's go. And so, yeah, it was to escape a flood of blood. And that was the message. So, you know, we're quite happy to be here because it's protected. And I think what message we got, I don't know how, but we got it. And I can assure you God exists and he will judge us all. So be prepared and be ready. And in the meantime, we need to, to be the children of Christ and not the children of Satan, because I think we're fighting the children of Satan, and among them are the communists. So that's my introduction.
Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah, very well said. Oh, yep. We're going to go straight into this.
Yeah, because it sort of leads from what he said about there being, what did you say, rivers of blood?
No, that was the Enoch Powell
that was
speech. But I'm not a racist. That's the difference, maybe. And we can talk about the riots in the UK afterwards. But Russia is clearly behind it, and nobody's talking about it because most of the, Tommy Robinson, for example, is a Russian stooge, and he has been for a long time. He was close to RT and to Russia. He's been many times to the Kremlin, and he did 6 months ago a video about Russia, saying that Ukraine is really at fault here, and Russia did nothing wrong, and they're the good people. But he's the one pushing for the riots, as well as Andrew Tate, who's another Russian stooge, and Elon Musk, who is the top of them, who reinstated their accounts, both of Tate and Robinson, and now these riots are you blame the Muslims for the wrong thing, because the guy who did it was not a Muslim. So the Muslims feel entitled to go rioting, which is the worst case scenario. And in the UK, they talk about this Russian influence, but in France, I was the only one to talk about it until today, and only today a French media talked about that. So that's quite disturbing, and it's pushing racism. And if you criticize Islam, that's fine, but if you criticize Islam for the wrong reasons, then you're at fault. And so that's what Tommy Robinson and Andrew Tate, who's a Muslim, by the way, has been doing, because their master is Putin and this Russian and Chinese international communist alliance. They're working for them.
Yeah.
So that's
well, Tommy Robinson has definitely always been a bad faith actor. He's got ties as well. I mean, he's met up with what was it? Like Netanyahu and stuff like that, and multiple trips to Israel, as well as articles on Russia Today. So he's always been a bad faith actor. I do think there's a lot of genuine anger in the UK that caused at least a lot of the protests. So there is some genuine anger there, and there are some underlying issues that caused it. But we sort of got into that topic last week.
Did you? Okay. Did you talk about the Russian influence?
No, we talked about Tommy Robinson and more the Israeli influence there, not necessarily the Russian one. We just talked about sort of the reason about why people were mad, that sort of thing, and the police response, which is also we went into the two-tier policing system and stuff like that. Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah, which is part of like anarcho-tyranny in UK, and it's like that by design. But we went into that last week. This week we'll talk about.
Okay.
This week was meant to be more about France and New Caledonia. So you mentioned leaving France and moving to French Polynesia. Are you worried about what happened in New Caledonia? Because they had these massive riots is nearly an understatement. It's like basically was in a state of civil war. Like the entire country was burned to the ground. It was it was basically ruined. Are you worried about what happened in New Caledonia happening in French Polynesia?
Well, yeah, of course, for two reasons. First, because I'm French, and New Caledonia is part of France. And second, because I live in French Polynesia, which is quite close. And obviously, we have here Russian influence too, and Chinese influence in New Caledonia. So TikTok was banned. I think it was the first time in the West that TikTok was banned, only for 2 to 3 weeks. But still, that's important to mention, because TikTok was pushing for the riots, believe it or not. So obviously the Chinese are behind this, as well as the Russians and the Azerbaijanis or Azeris. I don't know how you say it in English, but Azerbaijan, which is this country who is pushing for independence of French Polynesia, New Caledonia, and Guadeloupe and other territories, French territories. So yeah, it's always the same, because we're at war. I said on the 2nd of April 2020 that we're in the Third World War that China started with the pandemic, which was a biological attack. It's quite clear now. And then there was Ukraine, and then there was Hamas, who is playing for Iran, and Iran is close to Russia and China too. So you have the West and its allies on the one part, and what the West's enemies on the other part. So now you have to choose which side you're on. And so in New Caledonia, there was really it was a mess, and it was intentionally perpetrated by leftists, pushed by the Russian and Chinese and Azeris to make New Caledonia a shithole, basically, which is which it is right now. And so last thing was the factory nickel factory in the north at the hands of the Kanaks, which was closed. So you have 1,200 people now out of a job, and so it's becoming crazy. And so here in Polynesia, we have we discussed a bit about this before the show, but we have more and more New Caledonians coming over to French Polynesia to flee this mess, and others are going to New Zealand. You were telling me, and others to France, of course.
Yeah. I just coincidentally 2 or 3 weeks ago, I met a UK citizen that had been living in New Caledonia for 20 years, and they said, yeah, they had to flee because of the riots because their livelihood was destroyed. So, yeah. So yeah, I mean, basically there was these big riots in New Caledonia, and I guess what are the natives there? I don't know what you call them, the Canucks or something like that.
Oh, you have Kanaks, yeah,
Canucks.
the
They
Aboriginal people, yeah.
Yeah, they had a peace agreement with France that was signed in, I believe, like 1997 or it was 1996, and they were going to have 3 referendums, right, for independence, and they all failed. And because of that, they wanted to change local voting laws so that people actually living in New Caledonia could vote. And so there was a big riot, and they burnt the whole country down, completely destroyed its economy. They basically turned it into a third world country within a span of like 2 or 3 weeks. And then after all that, Macron backs down. Like, he gives in to the rioters' demands, gives them everything they want, and they're not putting through the voting reform. There's probably going to have another referendum, even though they've done the 3 they already agreed to. Both sides agreed to having these 3 referendums, and Macron just basically gave in to all their demands. So
Yeah,
it seems
you
sort
have
of
to understand. Macron is on the other side, is on the China side and Russian side. Even though he tries not to show it too much, but it shows. So he called himself a Maoist, believe it or not, during his 2017 campaign, and then he became president. He was supported by Raffarin, who is the main pro-Chinese guy in France. And ever since, he's turned France into a shithole. At least he's tried to. And New Caledonia was just part of it. But he did it too in French Polynesia. He came over here in 2021. You had the harsh lockdowns, even in New Zealand, because of your beloved communist over there.
She's not that beloved.
Who also said she was a Maoist as well.
Did she? Well, that's not surprising.
Yeah.
And so, but Macron came over. There was it was at the end of July 2021. There was no deaths whatsoever for the last 6 months, and he came over with 180 people. He could have just done a video conference, especially because of climate change, And then, but he brought with him the virus, the Chinese virus, the Wuhan virus, the CCP virus, and roughly 500 people died because of that in the month and a half after he left, which is the equivalent of 150,000 French people when you compare it to the French population, which is a massive, it's crazy. And people here are so traumatized that they can't even talk about it. And so that's what Macron did, because he wants to kill us. He's a Maoist. So what did Mao do with his people? He killed them. So he's doing the same thing. And the Olympics, they're going quite well for the moment. But it's always for the oligarchy and Macron to impose more of this China communist model on us, like cameras everywhere, facial recognition, and so on and so forth. We have QR codes everywhere in Paris now. So that's kind of a dream of the leftist. Paris has turned into a nightmare, which they call a dream, because you have no cars, just bicycles. I mean, this is almost a third world capital city.
Yeah, the leftists' technocratic communist utopian dream, right? Yeah, that's crazy. And it's in conjunction with New Caledonia. It seems that can I ask about Africa now, Hector? That's
I've got some tabs in Africa.
okay. Cool. Yeah, it's in conjunction with what's happening in New Caledonia. It seems like Macron seems to be ceding a lot of ground in the former French colonies to pro-Kremlin movements in Africa. And it seems like that there's like a whole new theater of war potentially opening up for Europe and NATO nations. Do you have any sort of extra intel on that, or um, anything around that? Because that is really alarming, just how he's allowing it all to go completely to the Russians.
Well, sure. I mean, Macron is not the first head of state, of French state, to do that. De Gaulle was the first one, obviously. He didn't fight for Algeria, to keep Algeria, which we had won the war, and he gave it away, including Sahara, where we were testing nuclear, we were doing nuclear tests. And so we had to do them in French Polynesia after that, which was crazy.
Very controversial here as well.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
And so, De Gaulle started it, and then all the next presidents did their part. Like Sarkozy, for example, he's depicted as a pro-NATO guy, but he's really not, because he forbid Ukraine to enter NATO, and also he pushed for he sold Mistral to Russia, which then Hollande cancelled. But and then he went to Africa, to come to our subject. So Sarkozy came to Africa, and he said Africa didn't enter history, which is really insulting. And nobody really understood why he did that. Most of the commentators in France said it's because Sarkozy is racist, but no, he's not. Actually, he's not. He's just anti-France and pro-Russian and pro-Chinese as well. And so in saying that, he knew that the African people would just hate France more, and just will welcome Russia and China more. That's all. And so Macron has been doing the same ever since he's been in power. So he has insulted leaders. The latest one was the leader of Senegal. And, he's doing the same thing every time. And people just say, oh, it's because it's Macron, He's Jupiter. That's the nickname he gave himself, Jupiter. That's really crazy. So there's something like Louis XIV, in Macron,
Right.
and he's got actually more power than Louis XIV, and now he's reigning in France, really, with nobody else. Like at the moment we're speaking, there's no actual government. He's the only one in charge, believe it or not. So
Yeah.
Because during the Olympics, we had to put politics aside. We had elections. We're going to talk about that. And but it was really not clear who won. Like everybody lost, really.
Yeah, it's a hung parliament.
Yeah, and so he's saying, well, nobody won, so I cannot name a prime minister. And so he's prime minister as well as a president. And so he's doing everything. And he's saying, well, during the Olympics, we should make a pause, really. But during this pause, you got wars all over the world. You got influences in France moving along, especially in Africa, or and so he's dealing with that all by himself, which is really the definition of a dictator, right?
That's amazing. And that was because of that snap election recently that he's accrued an insane amount of power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Should we just go straight into the election part of it then?
Yeah, well, it was brought up. It makes sense to go into it now.
Yeah.
So I'm sure most people know that France had an election. It was a snap election that was caused by Macron after the European elections, where the National Rally Party, formerly known as National Front, ended up winning most. I don't think it was a majority, but at least more seats than any other party. Caused a snap election, and the election, there was an electoral alliance between the leftist coalition and Macron's Ensemble party, basically to try block out the National Rally from having a majority, and it did sort of work. So even though National Rally ended up getting nearly 37% of the vote in the second round, which is more than the Labour Party got on the most recent UK election. So they got a massive amount of the votes, but because of this electoral alliance between, Macron and like literal communists, it caused a hung parliament. And also I guess you'd say the more like the Gaullist, like centre-right party, Republicans, They were just like
Mhm.
going, oh, I don't really want to have communists in charge, but I don't want to be called racist, so we're not going to have any sort of electoral alliance like everyone else is doing. So, you do have like a situation where the center-right de Gaulleist party basically just gave Macron and his like communist allies just free rein because they were unwilling to make any sort of alliance with the much more popular uh, National Rally Party. So it ended up in a hung parliament where no one has a majority. So, so can you tell us about like the lead up? Why do you think Macron called this snap election? Because it was obvious that he was going to lose his majority for his ensemble party and his allies in parliament. So why do you think Macron even called the election? Was it just to cause chaos?
Yes, that's what Maoists do. They
Yeah.
cause chaos. First thing, but I think it came from above. It came from China, and you had the same kind of snap elections in the UK at the same time, just before the Olympics, and at the same time as the Americans have elections as well. So you had a very unstable situation in the West with the three countries which have a seat at the UN Security Council, which are in snap elections or during elections like in the US. And so I think that's the main thing to understand, the big picture. Now, for the rest, I mean, Macron didn't know what to expect with this election, as everybody else, but he managed to, or he's a genius and he knew in advance, which, well, that could be possible. But in the end, there's no actual government at the moment in France, as I was saying. So he's the only one controlling the country. And God only knows what's going to happen next because you have, you summarized it well. You have a coalition of the leftists, which are now the pro-communist, pro-CCP guys. And the right in France is not of the right, it's at the right of the others, but it's not of the right. And so those guys are more pro-Russian, but they're also pro-CCP because in France everybody's pro-CCP. So what happened was you had this coalition of the leftists, and they came up with a name of a crazy woman, as you can expect, 37 years old, Lucie Castet, who was working at the Paris mairie, and who dig up the debt because that's all they know how to do. And so she now says she's a homosexual because apparently it's important for them to say. And so she wants, yeah, and so she wants to be named prime minister because their coalition came first, but they came first, but not a majority, so they cannot. If let's imagine Macron agrees, which he didn't, but let's agree he agrees, and then they form a government, and the day after. Rassemblement National is going to say no, so
Yeah.
there won't be a government anymore, and so now Macron is waiting for the end of the Olympics to name some other guy that will embody a broader coalition of the so-called moderate. And
Well,
by moderate, you need to understand communists, which are the moderate in appearance, because it's all a game of appearance. You call yourself moderate and you denounce the extremists on the other side, and everybody does that in France. And so they're all communists in power, but they call themselves moderate and the others extremists. But they're all close to China and sometimes to Russia, which is called the right, or far right, like Rassemblement National. So national, I don't know how you say it in English, but Rassemblement National is the party which was called Front National before, that you said.
yeah.
And so those guys have close connections to Putin and to the Kremlin. And the rest have close connections to Xi Jinping and pretend to be fighting Putin, even though they're close to him too. And so France is one of the European countries or the Western countries to help the less Ukraine. That's Italy, which helps even less, and Spain. But France is really not helping. It's 10 times less than UK, for example, in terms of financial budget, military budget. And so, Poland is helping more, much more. Denmark is helping like 25% of their military budget. France is only 0.9%. I mean, we're the third biggest seller of weapons in the world, and we're helping like nothing. And we're buying a lot of liquid gas, Russian liquid gas. So in the end, we're helping more Russia than Ukraine. But we say we help Ukraine, just like Italy. And Meloni was in China a few days ago, but she's saying she's helping Ukraine, even though without China, you don't have a war in Ukraine. Putin cannot make it. So that's the way it goes in France and in Europe at the moment.
Well,
Yeah.
as Lenin himself said, the best way to lead the opposition is to lead it yourself, right? And it seems like
Oh yeah.
that is kind of just what's happening in Europe and America too. It's actually kind of amazing how entrenched this communism is all across the world. And I think it's only now people are really starting to kind of wake up. Maybe is that the feeling you get, or?
Not in France, no. I can tell
Yeah.
you that
Oh,
we really. Was that a question to Hector?
oh no, to you,
No.
to you.
Oh, to me, okay. Then, well, no, I would say no. At least in France, I hope some people are waking up in the US, or you can say about New Zealand,
Mm.
but in France, certainly not. I'm quite alone at the moment with my subscribers and my followers, which are in the thousands, which is not a lot. Even though I've been doing this for 20 years now, warning about Marxism and also Islam, because they go together.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem. It's controlled opposition. So you played a clip of Besmenov at the beginning, and that's what he was telling all about in the 80s, and Golitsyn as well. New Lies for Old in 1984, and Jan Sejna and others that Jan Nyquist and Trevor Loudon are talking about. So they taught it to me, and then it helped me understand what was going on. But from France, I wrote a book in 2013 saying that communism had won, because I could see all around that, like popular democracies in the USSR, they believed they were democracies, but they were not. There were elections over there, but they were not real elections, and they were controlled opposition, and they were all communists. So that's the very situation we are in France. And Macron is called himself a Maoist. Marine Le Pen, so head of National Rally, calls herself a Marxist. So and the Republicans that you talked about, so the so-called center right, they called to vote for communists, like Xavier Bertrand, who is maybe the next prime minister. So he signed a deal with the CCP when he was the head of the Republicans, so named UMP at the time in 2009. He signed a deal, a contract deal with CCP. I mean, it's the first time in the history of France that a party signed a deal, and that's this guy Xavier Bertrand, who is maybe going to become prime minister, which wouldn't surprise me, because and he called to vote for a communist during the latest election. So he's really center right, yeah. And so Edouard Philippe, who was the prime minister in France in 2018, he called to vote for a communist as well during these elections, to have the far right beaten. So far right, they're not really far right, they're far left, actually. They want retirement at 60 years of age, which is crazy, which is really communist. And so, and a lot of other measures which are Marxist. And so that's the state of France. And the French people, well, they kind of deal with it. They try to, they try to work honestly. They have a family to raise and to feed, but apart from that, they can see their country just going to dirt. Now there's the Olympics, which is showing another France that we haven't seen for a long time, but it's Potemkin village. It's really they're very good at it, those communists, at showing something that doesn't exist and make people believe that it's the reality. So I would say the Olympics are the best Potemkin village that it's ever been done so far.
Yeah.
Just something you touched on earlier was that we haven't really got into Islam yet, but what are your like? There's in the last like maybe 2 or 3 years, there's been a sort of, I don't even know if you'd really call it a movement, but you've got like these, I don't know what you'd call them, commentators online saying that we should have like a Christian Muslim alliance against the degeneracy in the West and like Israel and all sorts of weird things like that. So, what's your thoughts on like these weird figureheads on the right? Maybe this is more of like an Anglosphere thing, where they go, "Oh, Christians need to unite with Muslims against like degeneracy and Israeli influence." It's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't do that.
Mm.
What do you think of this? Like, Islam is trying to infiltrate the right. It seems to be. I mean, they've already infiltrated the left. I mean, it's pretty obvious from stuff like this. But
Mm.
did you
Yeah,
believe in the Christian-Muslim alliance, or do you think it's just ridiculous?
well, depends what you call Christian. If you call Catholics Christians, yes, they are ready for it, because the Catholics would do anything to get rid of the Republic, as they say, and at least parts of the Catholics. But well, you have some guy who is the French Alex Jones, Alain Soral, who tried this 10 or 15 years ago already in a movement called Égalité Réconciliation, so equality and reconciliation, and he tried to gather anti-Semites mostly, so Catholics, Muslims, and atheists or communists. He himself is a communist. He was a communist in the 90s, and so he remained communist, of course, but he tries to have people believe that he's a Catholic. And he's obviously an anti-Semite. So this had he became number 2 in the national rally in 2006, when Jean-Marie Le Pen was still the head of National Rally, and so that was a big deal. Then he was kicked out in 2009 after losing the elections in 2007 to Sarkozy, and so, but he had made his way in this party. So they accepted Islam. The discourse changed from France and Europe and West is not compatible with Islam to yes, it is compatible with Islam, which was a big deal, because obviously that changes everything. And so now we have a far right, so-called far right, which is the equivalent of the center of the 70s or the 80s. So
Yeah.
it's a movement towards the left that we all see in the West. And so Islam has been infiltrating everything that they could, but they're not really they're not really bright, so it's just it failed most of the time. Whereas the Chinese, the communist Chinese, are very bright, and they did not infiltrate, they controlled. It's the elite control and elite capture that Trevor Loudon and John Nyquist are talking about a lot, and that's obvious all over the West. And even now we see Bangladesh. It's obvious that it's China that is behind, and the Pakistanis Secret Service. So you have this elite capture movement from CCP and communism in general going on all over the West. But France has always been communist since de Gaulle. And so there was not a lot of work to be done. It was already done by the communists that took power with de Gaulle and left everything to the communists, from the economy to the. So it's quite crazy that France didn't become a shithole before, because everything was done to. But I think French people are really good people, that they can still manage to have a great economy despite all of these communists at the top of the state, trying to bar them from doing anything really.
So yeah, at least there is still a way forward. Then do you think, for the French people, and we could see maybe a reestablishment of real France, despite all of these games, or obviously you went to French Polynesia for a reason, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, there's a human answer, and then there's the God answer.
Sure.
So the God answer is that France has gone too far in Sodom and Gomorrah, and now I was saying with this lady, I mean, I have nothing against her, Lucie Castet, but why does she say that she's a homosexual? I mean, who cares? And also Gabriel Attal, who is the current prime minister, even though he has no power because of the defeat during the elections, he also said he's an homosexual. So we had here our first homosexual prime minister in the history of the country. Yeah, he's the one. And so when you've gone so far as to say to God, well, we don't care. We just go all the way. And you all know about Macron, of course, and Brigitte Macron, who's a pedophile. I mean, I'm not saying she's a man because that's crazy, and there's no proof of that. And that's a Russian operation, by the way, pushed by Candace Owens, close to Andrew Tate and all these guys. But and Alain Soral, so the French Alex Jones, he's the one who pushed it first. And so with Iran, because he's financed by Iran and Russia, so we know that. So it's clearly a Russian operation. This Brigitte Macron is a man thing. But apart from this, Brigitte Macron is a pedophile because she was with Macron when he was 14 and a half, or 15, we don't exactly know. And so when you have a leader like that, the whole country gets rotten by the head. That's what the Chinese used to say. And that's true. So there we are. And so that's the godly answer. I think what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah will happen to France. I don't know how, and I don't know when, but it will, because that's God's will. And he said it all through his Bible. When you go against him, then he go against you. That's all it is. Now, as far as the human answer is concerned, well, I really don't know, because how can we get out of this mess, really? Everybody is a communist among the politicians, but also among the scientists, because they're pushing for climate change rhetoric all the way, and this is really communist. Scientists, politicians, media, I mean, and now sports, with Teddy Riner, for example, this judo guy who won gold against the Japanese and stuff. Well, the first thing he did when he came back to Guadeloupe is to put the flag of independent Guadeloupe. So he's pushing this rhetoric of the same thing as in French Polynesia and New Caledonia, of the independentists, so the pro-Russian and pro-Chinese guys. So he's running for them. He's a running dog, so the hope could be Léon Marchand, if we speak of sports guys, because this guy, he refused to shake hand with a CCP trainer, and it's been a big stuff in the media, and he's training in the US, so maybe he's got good thoughts about that. Now, that's just sports. Now France is a mess, and people are becoming more and more communist without realizing it. That's the problem. And I can see that when I speak to my fellow compatriots, and I try to explain them what communism is all about, why they should read Golitsyn. I've translated Golitsyn, but it was not up to me to translate Golitsyn 38 years after he published his book, and almost everything in it was true, and was, those falsifiable predictions that he made, 139 of them being true out of 148, so 94% in just 10 years, which is crazy, and nobody wants to read it. I tried to discuss this with French so-called geopoliticians and stuff, and they just tell me, communism is dead, there's no more communism, it's changed, Putin is coming back to Imperial Russia, there's got nothing to do with communism, Xi Jinping is not even a communist, once he's in power is different, and blah, blah, blah. So it's really... it's really disappointing from my French people. But once something really big happens, everything changes. So I think, like the Bible says, there's time and circumstance. So once time and circumstance will change, then people will change. But you'll have most of the French who will collaborate, and who are collaborating with Russia and China without even realizing it. Like going to the elections, there are no more free elections in France since 2005, because there was a referendum about Europe, and it was just thrown out. It was not... the
Lisbon referendum, right? Is that the one you're talking about? Yes.
And so since 2005, we're not in a democracy, so to speak. So why should we go to vote? And this was not a real vote, because you had to choose between a communist and another communist. So what's the choice, really? Oh, well, you have a Russian communist, a pro-Russian communist, and a pro-Chinese communist. Well, great. Thank you for the choice. No thanks.
Right. Yeah. So that there's not a whole lot of choice there. That the only thing I can think of is to continue, doing what you do, speaking to the French people and to everybody else, and try and, I guess, mobilize your followers who are obviously probably more intelligent than most, than the average person, and try and mobilize them into getting into politics and having our own sort of long march through the institutions, through France and through Europe is the only way I can, and start sort of re-subverting, or subverting everything back to how it was, even though straits look very dire right now, but yeah, it's a tricky situation, but we'll see.
But we've seen worse in France. France is a 2,000 years old country, as you know, and under Charles VII, it was John of Arc, and so the country was split into two, and the British were occupying half of France. So now is not as bad as during this time, or even De Gaulle, as bad as he was. He said the truth in 1940, and so he was totally unknown when he spoke on the BBC with Churchill, and then he became head of state. So this could happen again. Well, he did the alliance with the communists, which was really a mistake. But apart
Why
from
did
that,
he do that? Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, why did he do that? Well, because he was a communist himself, I think. He was a
Right.
Catholic, so not many difference to me as a Protestant. I think, yeah, ever since France destroyed their Protestants in the 16th, 17th, 18th century, we lost the first place that we had in the world. We were the first, under Louis XIV, we were the first power in the world. And then Louis XIV just destroyed it. And so, but then other countries benefited from the Protestants, French Protestants that fled when they were not converted by force or killed. And so that's the way it went. So we need to go back to the Reformed Protestants' values, and not just us, but also in New Zealand and all over the West, to become powerful again, because that's where power comes from. It comes from God, and when you follow God's order, then you're in good shape, and that's really not surprising. And so you can check this. I mean, with Hong Kong, what happened in Hong Kong is that they were among the first in all international rankings, freedom and business and everything. And once they were annexed by China, communist China, they just went down the drain. So yeah, I think
Interesting.
that's the right path, is to come back to God, and but it won't happen. I think once the facts, the reality matches your speech, then people listen to you. And that's why I've been saying for 4 years and a half now that we're in the Third World War, that China started it with the help of the P4 lab, that France gave China, against the will of the states, of the United States. And so those guys that came before Macron, before Macron, with Chirac and Hollande and Sarkozy, they're all guilty. And that's why we had this biological attack all over the world. So there need to be a tribunal, of communism and of the French elite in particular, because they really collaborated with the totalitarians of China.
Right. I want to get into more of your anti-communism soon, but you've talked about Macron. What are your thoughts on Marine Le Pen? Do you have any intel on her, or?
Yeah, I guess Le Pen. I'll just go back here. So Le Pen and Jordan Barbella, like the new sort of guy that they're obviously prepping for the new role of leading National Rally, because Le Pen's like, I don't know, 70 years old or something. So
No. she's in her 50s or 60s.
I thought she was way older than that.
No.
Sorry, but yeah, I don't know. I assume she's going to retire soon. So this guy's obviously being propped up for the next leadership position. Right. So I mean, obviously, they are still national rally is far from perfect. You would agree. But what are your thoughts on like the future? Do you think that the national rally's taken a turn for the worst? Is there a possibility that they can be pushed to the right direction, or is it just a lost cause?
Well, it's controlled opposition, so now there's no more difference between the National Rally and the rest,
Right.
because they have normalized their discourse up to the point that you can't see any more difference, except a little bit on immigration, but that's it. And so they have a lot of Freemasons, homosexuals, and ENARC, which is ENA, is the main school of thought in France, where all the party leaders go to be trained, just like in China, by the way. And so it was created by a communist, Maurice Thorez, in 1946. And so they all come out of this school being a communist. So that's the main. And so Rassemblement National now is just like the other parties. That's why they let them having so many MPs, you know. But Bardella, he's got no experience whatsoever. He's worked maybe a month in a company. He's 28 years old. He's so young, but he wanted to become a prime minister, which is crazy. It would have been even crazier than Macron or Gabriel Attal. And allegedly, he's an homosexual as well. There are videos where we can see him. Yeah, and so, well, officially, he's in couple with a Le Pen lady, by the way. So it's all, you know, for Rassemblement National, it's all family oriented. So it's a family business, really. And they don't care about the French people. They just care about their business ever since Jean-Marie Le Pen was in charge. And so that's the control opposition. And it's clear that they're here to make people believe that we are in a democracy, that there's debate. But during the pandemic, they were aligned with the oligarchy. So they're aligned on most questions, and just on little, nuances, they can say, "Oh, I don't agree here," but that's nothing really interesting or important. They're all pro-communist, pro-Chinese, pro-Russians, and now they have to pretend they're pro-Ukrainians like the others. So that's a fake choice, you know. So it's no hope there, but it's made to have people hope in the system, and that's how they do it. So now, as a French patriot, we need to say this is wrong, this is fake. But at every election, people fall in their trap, and I had to fight so many French people believing that the election's going to solve everything, and now they see that they don't. But they're saying, "Oh, next time it's going to do it." No, it's not, and they're going to fail in the trap again until maybe we receive a missile from Putin on Paris,
Right.
and maybe we'll understand then, but it'll be too late. I don't know.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Did you want to ask any more about
Yeah.
election stuff, Hector? Or? Okay, go ahead.
I think we've got a good segue there. So, find my tab.
Yeah.
Sorry, just give me a sec. Okay. So, I mean, you have people that, I mean, they send these parties in Europe that are supposedly anti-migration, but they're pro-Russia. But then at the same time, you have, Russian factions literally in like Mali pushing these people across the border to like Tunisia to obviously go catch a boat and try get into Italy and then into the rest of Europe. Or, just straight up flying them into like Moscow and sending them over the Finnish border, the Polish border, the Latvian border. So just like there's a fundamental, just like bizarre, I don't even know what you would call it, like double think. It's like they go, oh yeah, Russia's going to save Europe. Then at the same time, like Russia is the one sending all these like Africans and Arabs to try cross the border into Europe. It's like blatantly obvious, and I just don't get it. It's like I don't get how these supposed anti-immigration parties can say they're pro-Europe when Europe's like one of the main factors, sending hundreds of thousands, millions of migrants into Europe, and the other ones is also you've also got Israelis trying to send Gazans to Europe. But Russia's like pretty much on the same level as Israelis trying to send Africans and Arabs to Europe. It's bizarre.
Through
Oh, they're
highest.
much worse than Israel, to my knowledge, because during remember the Arab Spring, there was the Russians that were mostly behind it. And during the Syrian crisis, there was mostly Russia behind it. And at the other hand, you had Angela Merkel, which is very close to Putin, and who took 1 million, over 1 million refugees, mostly Syrians, mostly Muslims. So that's the way it goes. So Russia pushes for immigration, not just in Europe, but also in the US with Haiti. They're behind the Haiti riots over there, and so lots of Haitians had to move to the US. So they're doing it all over the world, and this has two consequences. First consequence is that you got a big turmoil in the West, of course, because Islam is not compatible with the West, so it doesn't work. And second, you have parties, pro-Russian parties, such as AfD in Germany, or Rassemblement National in France, or any other. You have Salvini in Italy, which is very close to Putin as well. And so those parties are rising, or Orban in Hungary, even though he doesn't take immigration, but those parties are getting stronger, saying that immigration is bad, but working for the people who are sending them immigration. And so, yeah, people don't get it. I agree with you. I don't know why, but in France, from what I can understand, is a quite clever strategy, right, to do that, because you need to think a bit to understand it. And in France, we've been sold the fact that communism was not pro-immigration but anti-immigration
Yeah.
from these pro-Russian guys. Did you have this as well in New Zealand?
Not in New Zealand, but I've seen this sort of rhetoric rising in just like Germany, like Czech Republic, Romania, all these places that have like these leftist parties, and they go, actually, communists are anti-mass migration, so we're actually going to save you from the West, save the West from immigration. And it's bizarre. Again.
Yeah. But they've been pushing this, and so they're hiding the fact that the Catholic Church is also really pro-immigration, and the Catholic Church goes together with the communist ever since John Paul II, because he was he was not anti-communist, he was anti-USSR, but he was pro-CCP, which is never said. And so ever since John Paul II, the Catholic Church has been pushing for immigration in France, and I'm sure in the rest of Europe. And they're working hand in hand with the CCP and with the international communism to push for immigration, and just say to the people who don't want it that they're racist and that they're not a good Christian, and that they should welcome all the poverty in the world. And Francois, I mean, how do you call this Pope?
Oh, sorry. I'll just play that on mute. It's something to look at.
Okay, so yeah, I was just saying that the current Pope is just he's a Marxist, really, and he's pushing for immigration, Islam, everything that destroys the West. And he's from Argentina, so that's not a surprise. And Milei over there is doing the right job, just breaking the socialism and communism, and putting capitalism first. Obviously, that's the answer. And God, maybe, but he's I'm not sure what his faith is. I think he's a Catholic, but he wants to become a Jew.
Yeah, so I don't really think his faith is particularly good, but please continue.
Yeah, but at least he's influenced by the U.S. So the Protestant culture is what influences things in a good way.
Right.
But so Russia and China, they're pushing what they're banning in their own country. This is really important to understand. Like TikTok, it's banned in China, but it's highly promoted all around the world. That's why it was banned in France during the riots in New Caledonia. Also, the mRNA vaccines, they were made in China with Fosun Pharma, which was never said, and they were forbidden in China, but they were pushed under the brand of Pfizer or Moderna all around the world. And LGBTQ, of course, which is banned in Russia and China, but is highly promoted and financed by Russia and China all around the West, especially in the US, but also in France. It's been demonstrated. Also, the pro-Hamas demonstrations, which have been financed, and Black Lives Matter, of course, which has been financed by China and by Soros, which is the useful idiot there, a very powerful one. So yeah, that's how it goes. And so immigration is the same thing. They don't want immigration in their country, and so Islam, yeah, they break Islam in their country. At least China does, not Russia, but China does break Islam in the Uyghur region, Xinjiang region,
Yep.
but they're pushing it in Europe because they know it's going to destroy us. And same thing for the fentanyl. They forbid fentanyl in China, but they make it and then send it to the US to kill 100,000 Americans per year with fentanyl. So that's
Yeah.
quite clear. And they did the same thing with the virus, because the virus was a weapon made to kill old people. So they have too many old people in China, so that was great, and obese people. And they have not a lot of obese people in China, but there's a lot of obese people in the US and in the West in general, and especially here in Polynesia. That's why there was so many deaths, because the highest rate of obesity in the world are the islands in the Pacific, not just French Polynesia, but Kiribati and Tuvalu and other ones like that. And there was a carnage over there. So, but they did it for the US, of course. And the virus was not against the children, because they lack children in China because of the one-child policy, and that really destroyed them. So the good part, if we want to be a bit positive about all of this, I want our listeners not to just suicide themselves, maybe. So those guys are very good in a strategic sense, but they're very bad in economic sense and human sense. So that's why China, when they did this one-child policy, that was really suicidal. It was really authoritarian and totalitarian to the Chinese, but it was also a crime against their strategy, because without people, then you just die as a country. And so they're really bad at economics as well. So they think they should master everything and it's going to work, but it's not. And so that's our chance, really, because otherwise we would be dead already. And same thing for Islam. They're really dumb. So that's our chance too.
Yeah, I mean, you
And,
just need to. I mean, that's the thing. You have these weirdos trying to say we should have an Islam-Christian alliance, and you're like, the average IQ of an Islamic nation's like 79. It's like,
right.
what
Right.
sort of alliance
Yeah,
are we meant to
because
forge here? Like, these people are stupid.
Islam makes you dumb, really, and that's why it's not a question of race too. Because whenever you have Christian nations turning Islamic nations, they become dumber. So it's the same race, but then it's different religion, and religion change people much more than their race. So that's our chance. Islam is really splitted also between Sunnis and Shiites, and between different countries. So that's things we should be pushing on. The divisions, and also divisions between Islam and the Russians and the Chinese, because you have 15 to 20% Muslims in Russia. So this is a way it should be a way for the West to just create stir there. And maybe the terrorist attacks that happened not so long ago in Russia was I don't know if the West had anything to do with that, but we should. I mean, just like what Ukraine is doing right now, in going into Russia, into Kursk and stuff like that. It's really important to be on the attack mode, not just defense mode, because otherwise we're going to lose. Yeah, you agree?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just bringing up a new link. But yeah, so you obviously have a lot of threats, right? And yeah, there's the threats from within. I don't know. I just can't believe it. There's all these people that claim that Russia and Islam's going to save the West from its own degeneracy, and it's been like, China via TikTok and Russia via years of subversion for a century, pushing these ideas, and now Russia's going to save us from the ideas that they pushed on us over the last half a century. It seems sort of bizarre.
I think the main reason for that is I've been thinking a lot about that, and because it's quite weird, as you say. But I think the main reason is that people are desperate. And so when people are desperate, they're ready to welcome anything else than what they have, you know. And so that's what happened during the conquest of Islam. The people that Islam conquered the most in a easiest manner were the people that were badly treated by their current power. And so they welcomed Islam, saying, oh, you're different, so you're going to save us. But then it was worse, and then they realized it just a few decades later, so it was too late. And so I think the same thing with the West. First, there's the propaganda from China and Russia through TikTok for the youngsters. So when you have this propaganda pro-Islam, pro-Hamas, pro-LGBTQ, pro all kinds of stupid stuff, stupid dances and challenges that hurt people, that are pushed to you, then you become dumb and dumber, and you become you turn into something as a zombie. You know, when you see the Generation Z, they look like zombies, really. They don't know. There was a video I saw just before this, and there was this Israeli woman asking, not saying that she was an Israeli woman, and she was asking Gen Z people, well, there was the biggest carnage in a concert in the West history. 350 people died, and do you condemn it? Of course, yes, we condemn it. Concerts are good. Yeah, it was a concert for peace. Okay, now let me tell you, it was from Hamas. And then they say, oh, well, that's different, you know, because Israel did this and that, and so it's justified. And so you see this propaganda from TikTok, which is really pushing pro-Hamas discourse. It's really turning people upside down, and they can't see the values of the West now. That the 7th of October was one of the worst crimes in history, recent history at least, and that. But there was also a fault from Israel. And it's like never said, because when you say this, you're seen as an anti-Semite or anti-Israeli, which is crazy. But Netanyahu
he let it
did
happen.
a really bad job.
He let the attack happen. Like they knew
Yeah,
it was going to happen.
We know this for a fact now. We know this, that he let it happen. Now we could say it's just like Pearl Harbor, that you know, we knew. Delano Roosevelt knew about it. He let it happen because otherwise it wouldn't have been possible to send the U.S. into the war. So that was a good thing in the end. Well, maybe, but then still,
at least Pearl Harbor was a military target, not a hundreds of civilians at concerts and whatnot. It's pretty crazy.
But I think that's worse than this from Netanyahu, and he's never criticized for that, which is really crazy. All during his, I don't know, 10 to 15 years in power, he got closer.
It's been longer than that, hasn't it? He first became prime minister in like 1996, and then he's sort of been in and out.
Yeah, but then, there was different prime ministers in between. But during all these years, he got Israel closer and closer to Russia and China. And this is really crazy. The Haifa port is now owned by the Chinese for 99 years. I mean, maybe 92 or 93 years left now, which is crazy. And all these Russians, I think it's 15 to 20% Russians in Israel. I mean, it's crazy. All the while, Russia was supporting Hamas. Israel was getting closer to Russia. So this is why 7th of October happened too, and it's never said. So I think that the Israelis, they need to get rid of this Netanyahu elite around him, because also what happened during the pandemic with the Pfizer craziness, and Israel was really in front and taken as a model for the West. I mean, and then they switched around, but it was too late. So the Israelis were really, how do you say, those animals that you test in laboratories.
Oh yeah, like guinea pigs or lab rats.
Yeah, guinea pigs, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, now we're at war. They are at war, so it's hard to change, head of state during the war. And Netanyahu wants more war so that he's not kicked out. But so it's really dangerous.
Well, just on a military level, like Israel's like military strategy doesn't make any sense. They go into areas and then they leave them again, and they come back, and it's just like, obviously it's just extending the war for as long as possible, cause as much chaos as possible. It's
Well, I think the last two killings were good. The number one of Hamas and number two of Hezbollah was good. It didn't kill any other Palestinians, and it did reach targets. So okay, they were replaced, but still, I mean, that was hard. That was hard to take for the Iranians and the Hezbollah and the Hamas guys. So I think they should be doing more stuff like this, even though it's not according to the international rights or whatever. Now the international right is in the hands of the Russians and the Chinese. You know, the UN is in the hands of the Russians and the Chinese. So that's the problem. That's why the WHO did what they did during the pandemic. They said, "Oh, everything that China is doing is great," and that's why Bill Gates says the same thing, and Klaus Schwab and all these guys. And so I think the West now needs to kill UN. And UN was also financing Hamas with UNRWA. I don't know how to pronounce it, but we need to get rid of UN now. I mean, not to kill the people in the UN, of course, but we you know, but just like after the Second World War, we got rid of the SDN. Société des Nations. I don't know how you say that in English, but the equivalent of UN before
League
the
of
war.
Nations.
So, yeah,
That's what it's
thank you.
called here, yeah.
So we need to do the same thing now with the UN, because it's just a pack of nonsense. I mean, you have the Saudis in charge of the human rights or whatever, or the,
Yeah, well,
I mean,
Yeah, go on.
whatever.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and the Libyans in charge of the women's rights, or I mean, what craziness do you have? So that's why the Russian and Chinese are in charge now of the UN. So they can impose, if there is a next pandemic, they're going to impose on us even worse than they did 4 years and a half ago. So this needs to stop. But I'm not sure whether the West has the strength and the might to do that, because when I see Trump, he's getting older, and he's taken JD Vance, a pro-Russian guy, pro-Russian stooge, and so this is quite concerning, because it should come from Trump. But I was more in favor of Nikki Haley. I think she was the good person, and she would have beaten Kamala Harris easily.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like she said during the campaign, she said, if you get Trump. It was during the Republican campaign. If you get Trump instead of me, you'll have Kamala Harris. And I think this could happen. And if this happens, then we're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
But there's still God. There's still God. So there's still hope. But still, we're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing. We've talked about JD Vance in depth. We've had someone on that sort of liked him. He's of his supposed conservative voting record. But the guy, I mean, Vance is, obviously, he's in the pockets of, both as it usually is, Russians and Israelis at the same time. So it's usually not a good combination. But yeah, I mean, yeah.
I think hopefully Israel will change now after the 7th of October. They will change. They will come back to the West, because they've been too far to the other camp.
I don't think Netanyahu's going to let that happen. Netanyahu wants his fiefdom. So
I'm not talking about Netanyahu. I'm talking about the Israel, and Israel is not Netanyahu, fortunately. So I think Israel will come back to the West, just like India will come back to the West, because they've been too far in the other side too. They even sent troops to Ukraine. I mean, less than North Korea, let's say, but still. And what's happening in Bangladesh now will push them in our camp in the West, because now they see they're surrounded with Bangladesh now on the side of China. They have no choice anymore.
Yeah, well, Indians can be pro-Western while they stay in India. We don't need, as we've talked about in the past, we don't really need mass migration from India. I think we're good.
Yeah.
Oh no. We need their power and their might on our side, because otherwise it's going to be on the enemy's side.
This is like, India actually does have like a more of a positive economic outlook than China, for example, which is just like ridden itself with debt, has massive demographic collapse coming within like the next 10 years. It's already having a declining population. It's loaded itself with debt that it can basically never pay off. It's going to go into like a period of economic stagnation like Japan did in the 80s within the next 10 years. Like that's nearly guaranteed to happen. So,
well, I wouldn't agree with that, because the difference is we're in the Third World War. and China is on the attack, and it has been for the past 4.5 years. So like an animal when it's wounded, it's even more dangerous. So that's what China is doing right now. They're the most dangerous they've ever been, because now it's all or nothing. And the CCP wants to protect their power, and in order to do that, they're in the same situation than Hitler, because their country, remember, Nazi Germany was just collapsing at the end of the 30s, and that's why Hitler tried to get from outside the growth he couldn't get from the inside, and that's when it started to turn into a world war. And that's exactly, I pretend, that's exactly what we're experiencing now with China and Russia, and that was the plan ever since Golitsyn warned us about it. And I think with Biden, I mean, they have a good time now to just destroy us with Biden and maybe Kamala Harris. If Trump is back, then maybe, I don't know. I'm really not sure with Trump now, but I think it'll be better than with Biden, that's for sure, or with Harris. So now there's another 3 to 4 months where China and Russia can do really bad things to hurt us, and I think that's what's going to happen. But let's hope not.
Yeah, it's really important to look into Anatoly Golitsyn, and actually, this guy we're showing here is really good at, not Joe Biden. This guy's One Tall Order. He does a lot of great videos breaking it all down for people, and of course, you and Nyquist and Loudon, you and Benish, you guys do fantastic work.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, you guys service for humanity. I mean, it's really important that people understand. No, really, it's important that people understand this dialectical strategy, because it's just incredibly complex, and people like the best way that I think to be truly anti-communist and be nationalist, whether you're a French nationalist or British nationalist or whatever, is to just be pro your country and pro Western and pro Christ. That if you can stand on that firm rock, things become a lot more clear. And then you're able to much more easily distinguish between your friends and your enemies, and not cannibalize yourself, not because so many people even oh, let's sell out to Russia, let's sell out to China, or
you got people like, oh, life would be better if we were a Chinese colony. It's like, are you just like stupid when you say stuff like that?
Yeah, Jean Robbie's shaking his head. Yeah, it's yeah, or even North Korea. I mean, it's insane. So I mean, everybody needs to not only get active, but we need to be reading, we need to be researching, we need to be educating ourselves and our family, and that is part of our service to God and to Christ and to our nation. I want to steer a little bit back into Jean Rabin and his life, I guess, or his life's work, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. We can finish with that, because I'm starting to become a bit tired. As I told you beforehand, after an hour and a half in English, my English is becoming too dizzy. Otherwise, in French, I can
there we go.
remain for 4 to 5 hours, but in English, I've noticed that after it's been an hour 24 minutes.
Right.
So maybe we can talk another 10 to 15 minutes max. But
Okay.
yeah, I'll be happy to discuss about my life if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering. I think this is probably important. There's actually a lot of questions I would have liked to have asked, but that's okay. So how I'm interested, how did you get into anti-communism, and at what point did you realize that this was really just an international plot to take the West down?
Well, first of all, I noticed the situation in my country, and we have what we call URSAF. So it's USSR, believe it or not, AF. So it's the main. See, I can't find my words now. It's the main company. Well, it's not a company. It's the main organism in France which collects taxes, and it's called USSR something. So I had to deal with them because I created many companies, and so I started to realize, well, this is communism. They take 50 to 60% of what I earn, even more sometimes. And then you have CGT, which is the Communist Union, which have been imposed in 1921 by Lenin himself, which is still running most of the country, which can block the country in the rails, in the suburban areas, with the underground stations, and so I realized that we're a communist country with a social security which is imposed on people. You cannot choose a company; you have to deal with the state company. Then you have the retiring. You're forced to work to a certain age. You cannot choose how many time you want to work, and the state takes whatever they want to take from you when you work. And then you have national education, which is also forced on you since you're 3 years old. I mean, which is crazy. And so the state is in charge in France. And so we invented communism, unfortunately, in 1793 with Robespierre and Babeuf. And ever since, we've dealt with that like it's good, which is not. It's really a mess. And so since you don't have Protestants anymore in France, we were not able to fight it as well as other countries such as the States or UK or maybe New Zealand could. And so now we're really into it, and people don't see another way. Like they always talk about the American influence or the Zionist influence or the Islamic influence, but never the Russian and Chinese influence. I mean, I'm almost the only one in France to speak about it, believe it or not. And I've demonstrated that most of the French elite are captured by China or Russia or both. I've demonstrated it. It's I will release a book shortly, which will be a 500 to 600 pages book with all the people in the elite that have praised China, for example, or worked for it, or are young leaders, of the French China Foundation or Paris Shanghai Club or any of these influence clubs that we have in France. And so, but people don't believe it because they've been brainwashed. And now, so when I realized France was under communism, that was just the first step. And then I realized it was an international movement when I discovered Golitsyn, because I was not aware. Like when Jeff Nyquist, I interviewed him in 2021, I asked him, do you think that Russia is going to turn against China just like Hitler turned against Russia in the Second World War? And he said to me, what? Have you not read Golitsyn? And I said, who? And so, and when I read it, it was quite clear. I mean, when you stick to the facts, you just believe Golitsyn, because he said it in 1984. He wrote it in 1984, and now we have 40 years where we can see that he was right. So we just need to believe him. But I see most of the French people that I talk to, they don't want to. So that's, it's something crazy, because when you don't stick to the facts, then you live in an illusion. And so you don't want to believe that communism exists and that it rules most of the world, and that he wants the new world order that we've been hearing about from Alex Jones and a lot. Well, that's communism. And so Alex Jones was talking about communism 20 years ago. Now he's not anymore. He's talking about the Jews or the conspiracy that. But no, it's really communists that are behind, and they want to destroy us. They want to destroy our liberties, and that's when I realized it.
Yeah, interesting. So, what sort of, I guess, historical events do you think are important for lay people who are just kind of getting into this? Just they're hearing this from you for the first time. What are the most important historical events or historical epochs for people to understand that there's an internationalist communist conspiracy or threat?
Well, it depends.
Yeah, sorry.
It depends on in which country they live. But I think if you live in New Zealand, you need to look at how your country turned into almost a Chinese country in the latest years. I have friends who went in New Zealand 15 years ago, and they were fine. And then they came back 2 years ago, and they said, "Well, I don't understand why all these Chinese shops everywhere and Chinese companies and stuff. I don't recognize New Zealand, right?" So, I mean, you don't need to look too deep. I mean, you just
Yeah,
need
it's
to look
not. I mean,
around.
just look at who's donating to the political parties here. It's pretty easy to find out.
And yeah, exactly. And so just look at the lockdowns. I mean, the lockdowns were initiated or originated in China, which is not known to be the most free country in the world. I mean, last time I checked. And so once you have these gulags at home, then you start to realize, well, maybe it's communism, And next time I'll be put in a gulag outside my home, which is going to be even worse. But gulags at home, it's not good. I mean, and it's not working, especially if you're in good shape. It's not going to help. So yeah, it depends. Historical event. I don't know. The fall of the USSR, I think, is the main event to understand that USSR never fell. And Putin said to Tucker Carlson last time he interviewed him that USSR fell on purpose. He said it 40 years
Yeah.
exactly after Golitsyn wrote it in New Lies for Old. So yeah, you heard that too, right?
Yeah, basically kind of tacitly admitting to perestroika deception, and
Yeah, well,
that's
not tacitly. He said it.
oh yeah,
We collapsed USSR on purpose. That's what he said. You can look at 24th minute of this interview with Tucker Carlson, if I remind it correctly, which is really crazy for him to say that. I mean, he says it because he's won. He knows he's won now, so he can say it. The strategy has been done, so there's nothing we can do about it anymore. Well, just we can understand it and fight it and explain it around us. And I
After
think
all,
that if you are listening to us and you have understood this, your role is to explain it to others. And by that, yeah, exactly.
I'll play the clip.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
this interview,
Let Putin
after
say it.
all, the
24th minute, I
collapse of the
think.
Soviet Union was effectively initiated by the Russian leadership.
Oh,
Yeah.
great! You have a clip of that. That's good. That's very important. So yeah, exactly. So we need to. That's why I translated New Lies for Old in French and Perestroika Deception as well. I think we need to read it again and again and translate it in our own language. But I mean, in English, it's fine because it's been written in English. And then spread it. There's a numerical versions that you can spread for free of New Lies for Old in English, not in French. So, but yeah, and once people understand it, then it's all it makes more sense. And you see the enemies, because as you were saying, if you mistake your enemy for your friend, then you fight your friend, and you make a team with your enemy, which is not good.
Yeah, I mean that
The-
seems to be a sort of thread that people don't have that I've never understood. They actually believe this like enemy of my enemy is my friend, but really the enemy of my enemy is still my enemy. Like that's just the way it is. That's reality. Like not everything is like black and white and a binary. Like there can be multiple different enemies at the same time.
Yeah, that simple logic is just like, come on, guys, like get it together. And I mean, even understanding, Marxist communist philosophy helps us, especially with Lenin. To me, Lenin is perhaps the most deadly in his communist philosophy. He really chastised his own disciples, his own followers, by saying, look, you don't want to adopt capitalist positions. You don't want to adopt right wing nationalist, right wing positions. You people are idiots. He called them idiots, and he even said we have to be. In order to be victorious with our communist revolution, we need to adopt right wing and free market positions. So people don't even really understand the sort of ever morphing, very flexible. I mean, as Jean Robin said himself, you've got the LGBT and the TikTok, but you've also got the militant Islam and the Black Power stuff, and all the stuff they put their fingers in every pie to get them to achieve. Well, basically, it's targeting the West, which they view as the antithesis to communist doctrine and communist civilization, which is basically just a system of power and control. It's not an economic system. It's a system of control, and that's what people really need to understand. I really wanted to get this quote up by Nyquist, which just fully said it all in like one big paragraph what communist was, and I was like, that is it. That is what it is. That this is what people need to understand, because they're still stuck on Karl Marx, saying, "Oh, the means of production, blah blah." You can pretty much just get rid of that, and just read and listen to what the defectors and what Lenin and Trotsky said themselves. So to really understand the ever morphing nature of this this multi-headed beast. Jean Rubin, sorry, you're
No,
going
it's fine, because I can add to that the layer of the divine, because communism is a way of sin to reign on the world. That's a good way to see it, because in the West, we have dealt with sin in recognizing sin exists, first thing, and then trying to fight it. Whereas communism is anti-God, so pro-sin. And so once we understand this, and that's why they can ally with Islam quite easily, because Islam is also pro-sin. When you see their prophet, which is their model, he has sinned all his life, sorry, and so he has killed, he has raped, he has robbed. I mean, all sins possible, and so that's why they find common ground on sin. And so communism, Islam is fighting the West because they hate God, they like death, and they find they're a common enemy, and that's why they can fight even together, even though they're quite different. But that's that's Satan. That's what Satan is all about. You have these legions, and so divide and conquer. So they infiltrate us with their craziness, and then they accuse us of these craziness, which is really intelligent. But we need to be more intelligent and stop saying, "Oh, Islam is the problem because Islam." I see this with my French friends who are not, they talk about IQ all the time, and most of them are racist, by the way. And they say, "Oh, the black people, they're too dumb, and the Arabs, they're too dumb. Their IQ is so bad." But they themselves have an IQ which is not high enough to understand communism and this strategy. So I try to explain to them, but they don't want to. And well, we need to keep doing it and tell the truth, and God will do the rest, as we say. That's what I keep on saying, because we cannot do much more, really. Or we can start fighting in Ukraine and take arms on the battlefield. But I'm not ready for that, personally. If people are ready for that, we can go there. But that's very courageous, and much more courageous than earning medals at the Olympics, of course. Now, and maybe we can stop with this, because first thing, I'm starting to become a bit tired with my English.
We'll wrap it up.
Sorry about it. So if we can conclude, and I was very happy to talk with you today, and thank you again for this invitation. And I'll let you maybe say what you want. As the last question.
We'll wrap it up now. Thanks for joining us, John Rabin. It was a very interesting talk. We got to talk about France and a few other things. If you're interested in anti-communism and John's philosophy, you can check out his Twitter. You can check out his Amazon page where he sells his books. As it loads.
Make sure to check out page. Sorry, go ahead, Hector.
And also his. Oh, my browser froze. I can't click my other tabs. Oh, wait, there it goes. And also check out his website, which I can't pull up because my browser just froze. So, So check all those out. Oh, no, wait, it's there. There we go. And check out his blog and check out his YouTube channel. Most of those links, I believe, are in the description to this video. Hope everyone had a great Saturday morning. Hope everyone's going to have a great weekend. And stay blessed, not stressed. And God bless to everyone that's watching the replay, everyone watching live. We'll see you all next week where we have another epic guest on. See you soon.
See you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.